Okay, let's get started. Welcome to the second presentation in our Mission Control webinar series. These webinars are designed to show you how easy it is to create exams in Certiverse. We put you in control of test development from start to finish. For those of you who weren't with us last time, my name is Mary Beth Moan and I'm CMO for Certiverse. I've worked in the testing industry for about a decade, and I'm joined by our Chief Psychometrician, Dr. Alan Mead. Alan, can you do a quick introduction for those who missed our last presentation?
Absolutely. So my name is Alan Mead, and as Mary Beth just said, I'm the Chief Psychometrician at Certiverse, and my training is as a psychologist, and I've worked also as a psychometrician. And my research interests involve applying machine learning and natural language processing to exams, and so that's very germane to today's talk.
Thanks, Alan. And just a quick housekeeping note that you'll be muted during the presentation. However, if questions arise while we're presenting, please submit them via the group chat, or you can DM the panelists if you prefer to remain anonymous, and we'll make sure to address them at the end of the session. And first, before we begin talking about content, I wanted to provide a quick review of the end-to-end process. In our first webinar, we covered the JTA and exam blueprint, the steps in blue. A recording of that webinar can be found on our website if you missed it. Today, however, we're going to talk about the next phase of exam development, that purple section in the middle, content creation. And while it looks like a small step, it's really the heart of exam development. So we will explain what's involved and then demonstrate how the system accelerates and streamlines these steps. And then after the holidays, we'll come back and do another webinar that covers form creation and test building. Okay, let's dive into content creation. Alan, what goes into that process?
So content creation encompasses several things. We detailed how to create an exam blueprint in the last webinar, and that's the framework built from the JTA that leads into item assignments for the content contributors. Blueprints have weights, which are derived from the JTA or from a judgmental process, and assignments are calculated from the weights so that an exam program has enough content to build the required number of forms. Many programs start off with 2 forms. And it's not enough to write anything. The psychometric analyses that we perform later can only remove bad items. We don't have an analysis that adds good items or fixes an item per se. So item writing and review need to create as many high quality items as possible. And high quality items are fair, unbiased, psychometrically balanced. They are well written, clear to the target audience, on topic, and follow the item writing rules. And a pool of high quality items also implies that the items are written to the correct proportion. If you ultimately want 10 items for a topic, you're not going to beat that goal by writing 9 items. You're probably not going to beat that goal by writing 10 items because you'll probably lose some items in later steps. Careful monitoring and planning is needed. Now that's item authoring, and I'm sure that most authors most of the time try to write high quality items, but mistakes are made, and that's where a solid peer review process comes in to help catch those errors and correct them to make a better pool of items.
Clearly, writing test questions is an important task. So who are the people doing this work?
These content creation steps are done by subject matter experts or SMEs, and selecting a good team of 6 to 12 engaged, knowledgeable SMEs is critically important. A SME is someone who has a clear understanding of the job role, which would include experienced people working in that role, their managers, people who train the candidates for that role, etc. For a testing program, that could include employees, credential holders, resellers, members, etc. And many programs have a built-in community of experts, although typically only a fraction of the eligible SMEs can join in an in-person meeting due to scheduling and cost constraints. Because Certiverse is online and built for asynchronous effort, our platform allows a much larger percentage of those experts to participate.
We've heard the asynchronous approach sometimes referred to as crowdsourcing, which leads some people to think that any Joe Schmo off the street can contribute exam content. But that's not the case with Certiverse, right?
That's definitely not the case. Our partners maintain control over the contributors who contribute content just as they would in a traditional setting, but with more flexibility to involve a wider range of experts.
You know, Alan, this is the part that really got me excited when I first heard about Certiverse. Many of us have been thinking more about what we can do to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in our own spheres of influence. And I think Certiverse supports that goal for the testing industry because the remote asynchronous model means you can invite a much broader array of SMEs to participate. For example, those who live in opposite time zones or who live far from the nearest airport, people who have difficulty traveling due to either physical limitations or outside commitments like work, school, or coaching their kids' Little League team. And I think it's no secret that women still tend to shoulder more caretaking responsibilities, whether it be for children or aging parents. So allowing asynchronous development can also help balance gender equity and allow single parents of any gender to take part more easily. And then in addition to people who typically can't contribute due to availability or scheduling issues, I think Certiverse also has the potential to expand an organization's SME pool by appealing more to those who might find a group workshop setting to be intimidating or overwhelming, such as introverts or individuals who are neurodiverse. So one of the strengths of the platform is in giving people a way to contribute that feels comfortable and less threatening to some. We've all been in a meeting with that one know-it-all, right? Well, the Certiverse approach keeps that single voice from dominating the conversation. So you get a better balance of viewpoints and perspectives, which I think leads to a more representative end product. Okay, so once an organization has its pool of SMEs all lined up, how have the item writing and review steps typically been done?
Well, I'd say that there is a lot of variation across programs in how well item writing is supported. Some programs write items out in item writing workshops. I know of a program that fills in a Word template. Other programs might have a item writing interface that is really slick, or maybe not. And one thing that I think is really interesting is that the item writers are selected because they're experts in the subject, but they're not usually experts at writing items. So typically there's an extensive item writer training, usually half a day to a couple days, which covers a long list of general and specific topics. There's a long list of do's and don'ts. And I'll describe later when I'm demonstrating the product why I think that's particularly inefficient. After the training, items are written in batches. They're collected, possibly triaged. They may have a peer review, which can be extremely helpful, but typically this is done by reading questions to a group. It's very time consuming. Projectors and conference rooms are usually involved. Programs may vary considerably in the number of levels of review, but usually there's a few long and labor-intensive rounds with the exam developers shepherding the items from review to review. And anecdotally, we've heard feedback saying that a lot of the content has to be rewritten, which of course is inefficient and thus costly. There's a widely cited figure estimating that a single item for a large academic entry exam costs thousands of dollars. And so if you want thousands of items in your pool, that's millions of dollars. And managing and staffing an item writing campaign usually requires quite a bit of expensive labor and quite a lot of expensive time.
But what are the drawbacks to this approach? It sounds like you'd need a project manager just to keep track of the item status.
Well, we have a picture of herding cats. And the biggest challenge, I think there's a couple drawbacks. The biggest challenge is that SMEs are generally busy people and they're interested in contributing, but it's likely they have competing priorities. They have a job, family commitments, etc. And as we mentioned in the last presentation, Zoom fatigue is real. So when the timeline of your exam is dependent on a training workshop or coordinating Zoom meetings with busy professionals, then you're only one vacation or illness or some other problem away from a delay. And a lot of launches have been delayed weeks or even months. And secondly, as mentioned earlier, SMEs are chosen because they're experts in the exam topics, but they may not be experts in item writing. So providing proper guidance to SMEs is key.
Let's talk about how Certiverse approaches remote development differently. When the pandemic first started and people initially began doing remote workshops, I'm guessing that a lot of SMEs were happy to participate just because they were stuck at home and bored. However, now that people are vaccinated and free to resume a lot of their pre-pandemic activities, I'm thinking it might be more difficult to engage SMEs remotely via a Zoom workshop. So can you tell us how Certiverse overcomes that challenge?
I think there are two reasons Certiverse works better for remote development. First of all, since Certiverse is asynchronous, the SMEs can work on their own schedule, which makes it a lot easier to add item writing to SMEs' other commitments. It's just far easier than trying to schedule a workshop. Second, I think the integration within the platform removes a lot of friction. development moves along and doesn't get bogged down with the kinds of delays that can demotivate SMEs.
Okay, can you tell us a little more about how Certiverse does that?
Sure. It's not one thing so much as a combination of strategies. First, making it easier to write and review and revise items. And second, the platform supports the item writers. The item writers are not assumed to be experts at item writing. And so, for example, it gives them coaching on best practices. And those are based on some machine learning models and some natural language processing.
That sounds a little bit like TurboTax, in that you don't need to be a CPA to do your taxes as long as you follow the prompts.
So TurboTax is a good analogy. Once an item is written, it then goes into peer review. Other experts have a chance to flag problems that cannot currently be automatically detected using machine learning and natural language processing. The most common issue that comes up in our reviews is that the item isn't clear. And SMEs also get prompts to keep the project moving along through system notifications and status information. And also, when a SME logs into the system, the platform outlines what their current action items are. So there's no guesswork or having to keep track of the reviews on their own. The alerts and reminders are triggered by actions in the system, which reduces the burden on the test development staff. And to keep SMEs invested throughout, Certiverse provides gamification, badging, and revenue sharing options to reward them for their contributions. I think it's also important to note that although the platform is asynchronous, there's still plenty of opportunity for the SMEs to interact with each other and with the exam developers through the built-in messaging system.
Okay, let's take a look at some of these innovations in the platform.
Great. Let's start with item writing. And here's how item writing looks to a SME who logs in. They, after a secure login, they see a short video-based tutorial. And then, my video isn't playing. And then this video-based tutorial is available to them along with the job role all the time when they're writing items. So the subject matter expert picks a topic to write one of the available topics to write an item, and it starts up this wizard that walks them through each step. We can see that the system is analyzing the item as it's typed and provides warnings when item writing rules are broken. It's flagging the use of negation and that the stem is not the form of a question. So we fix that, and now the stem is well formed, and the warnings are gone. And I'm really excited about this real-time feedback. We did a literature search to find out what kind of item writing was best. And we found, we looked for empirical papers comparing item writing approaches, training approaches for item writers. And we found 2 papers that touched on that topic. So all the master's theses, all the dissertations that are written by all the graduate students and all the researchers, I'm amazed that nobody thought it was important to look at different ways of training item writers. But I'm familiar with an area called performance appraisal, which has studied different ways to train people to perform performance appraisal. And I think that literature has a very clear message for item writing, which is that a long list of do's and don'ts is not an effective training method. Practicing with feedback is an effective method of training the item writers. So I think having subject matter experts jump in and write items with real-time guidance is a lot better than lengthy training that frankly doesn't have any empirical support. And I'm convinced that these prompts improve the quality of the items that the subject matter experts write, and we know that it improves their efficiency. Rather than discouraging them, our system is so easy and approachable that some SMEs end up over-contributing. Anyway, the SME continues completing the steps in the wizard, and we'll see that there are additional warnings based on the content and the structure of the responses. We base these warnings on the well-known rules from, I think you say his name, Halidina and Downing. And the system is going to tell her that all of the above isn't a good answer, which is one of the rules. It's rule number 3 in their rules for writing items. If you're not familiar with Halidina and Downing, if you Google item writing rules, it's the first hit that I see, and it's the first page of hits, different people putting their rules online. So it's very ubiquitous set of rules. So we're going to change all the above to something else, and now we get a rule. We get a rule firing saying the length of the option responses are not consistent enough. So she fixes that, and we'll see that the item is ready to finalize and submit. When she clicks submit for review, she gets an email thanking her for writing an item, and the item automatically goes into the review queue for peer review. It's available immediately for another SME to review. And I'm really excited about the way that we can enforce some of Halladina and Downing's rules automatically. But I have to admit that the automation built into the system is probably equally valuable, if not more so. The transition from having assignments to writing items to selecting an item to review, it's all seamless and easy. And I guess I would ask you, this is not interactive, I'd love to be in front of you in person, but when's the last time your SMEs described the item writing process as easy? Because for me, I know exactly what it was. It was October 5th when I administered 2 weeks ago, when I administered a post item writing evaluation survey. And some of the comments, and I'm reading these verbatim, was ease of filling the item and reviewing it quickly, easy, and easy to keep track of what is being worked on. So I see a theme there in those comments. So we also, another piece that we've gotten positive feedback on from the SMEs is the gamification that tracks achievements and celebrates our milestones, like their first item submitted or leveling up to a new constellation, as we put it. So that is the item writing. Let's take a look at item review. When a SME starts a review, she doesn't realize it, but she's checking the item out. Nobody can do anything with that item while she's reviewing it. So we put a time limit of 2 hours on each review. It doesn't take people nearly that time, but sometimes they go to lunch or something like that. So there's a time limit. And we also have controls built into the system that you can't see and I can't demonstrate for you that are designed to enforce exam security that limit SMEs to seeing just enough of the item pool to complete the peer reviews. And as part of that, we randomly select the items for review, either from the entire review queue or from the specific topic area. So just like item writing, step through a wizard, we provide support for reviewers. The first step is to complete the item as a test taker. And if they get it wrong, then we ask why. And we feel like completing the item first as a test taker provides a good perspective to start the review. For example, the reviewer begins to think about the structure and the logic of the question. Reviewers answer a series of questions about the item's content and phrasing. For example, the first question is, does the question focus appropriately on the topic? And if they answer the question, the review questions in the wrong way, then we gather data from feedback, that will help the author revise them. And these questions reflect additional Halladina rules that are not currently enforced using NLP and machine learning. The third screen here asks questions about each response option. And the last screen asks 2 quick questions about the item overall. If the SME is given any feedback, then we disable the clearly pass, but they can still choose pass with minor revisions or clearly fail. And if they don't pick clearly pass, then the item and the feedback go back to the item author for revision. So the item author receives a notification that she has an item to revise. So here's item revision. To revise an item, SMEs use their dashboard. And again, the system orients them to with informational message as shown to help them understand what they need to do. And it guides them through the revision process. This item has 2 comments that are the same about the item not being clear, which is the most common type of problem that we see. And so she fixes the item by clarifying the item. And then she moves on to the next item. She sees that the next item is the same, so the item is ready to be submitted. The average number of it's submitted into the review queue for another review. The average number of reviews for one project was 2.8, and about 60% of the items were approved in 2 rounds, so less than that average. And an additional 24% of them required more. 84% of the items were completed their review process within 4 rounds, and 16% required more. And I think, by the way, we can make that better, but it's already quite efficient. While the SMEs are writing items, the test sponsor can log into the system and see at a glance what progress is being made. This screen is the sort of opening screen of the item management portal. You can see what the status, what the various stages of status items are in. They're being written, they're reviewed, they're being revised, the ones that are accepted, and how many additional items are needed. And you saw the gamification alerts just a few minutes ago that came up during authoring. We also have a leaderboard that monitors which SMEs have contributed the most, whether that's the JTA task writing or reviewing items or writing items.
Let's talk about gamification for a minute. As a marketer, I see a lot of potential here for engaging and motivating SMEs. Contributors can level up by earning stars for each activity they complete in the system. And it's a small thing, but we know it makes a difference and encourages SMEs as they participate. Our post-development surveys of SMEs have shown that this is a popular and appreciated feature that makes authoring process more fun. Because Certiverse keeps track of SME participation and performance, it's easy to create incentives based on contributions, providing prizes or branded swag upon reaching certain tiers, running contests where the top contributors get a free trip to an industry conference, or what have you. And we also have partners that issue badges to exam contributors, and that's a great motivator as well. But in addition to these, there are a number of financial incentives that can be built into the process. For example, paying SMEs a royalty for items they write that are accepted and used in the test. This incentivizes both quality and quantity of content. Oftentimes, a program may want to pay their SMEs, but assume that they can't afford to do that. However, Certiverse is designed to make testing programs available to a broad range of organizations, and the savings that come from compressing development timeframes and eliminating the need for travel allows for more budget flexibility. Plus, incentivizing SMEs often leads to larger item pools, which in turn increases security. So lower development and delivery expenses can then lead to lower fees for test takers and greater access to the exam. So if you think about it from that big picture perspective, compensating SMEs becomes a much more viable option. You get lower upfront costs, a wider customer base, and a higher quality exam to boot.
Thank you. So as we did in the previous seminar, I wanted to share what all this looks like in the context of a real world program. So here's some numbers from the inaugural launch partner, the Linux Foundation, who incidentally used the SME royalty model for creating the LFCA exam. And the asynchronous model allowed a large group of experts from around the world to create content for a brand new exam without ever having to connect in the same place at the same time. And as we can see, the authoring effort was completed within a month's time. And the amount of time that an individual SME contributed varied, but on average, we figure it was about 10.5 hours. And that means that the average SME wrote, reviewed, and revised items for an exam in less time than it would have taken her just to travel to an item writing workshop and sit through the typical item writing training, consisting of a long list of do's and don'ts. I think that's a pretty remarkable thing.
Wow, that's really striking when you put it that way. And it's definitely a differentiator for the Certiverse system. Okay, so I know we've covered a lot today, but we'd be happy to answer any questions that we have time for right now. And we've got about 6 minutes left. So if you have questions on something we didn't get to, go ahead and submit that via the chat. We've got one question here that says, as it relates to revenue sharing options for SMEs, how exactly does that work?
Well, how that works is that we create an exam as usual. A percentage is designated for the royalty, and as the item appears on exams that generate revenue, a royalty is recorded and paid out. So a small amount for every exam that's administered that includes the items that you wrote.
And I think there's another instance where it's also being used just for accepted items, like a set fee for any accepted item.
We
So
also have people
different
writing
ways.
items that pay for each item. And at that point, they pay for them when they're accepted.
Yeah.
The,
So I think there's flexibility there in terms of how the test sponsor wants to work with that.
absolutely.
We've got a couple more here. Do you want to take a look at them, Alan?
I just figured out how to. Does the platform also work as a SME management system? Well, I guess for some values of SME management system, the answer is yes. Definitely, there is a degree of managing the SMEs. Maybe it's not focused on that at the current time, and so it's sort of focused on the portions of that that you would need to create an exam. We are going to add some capabilities to enhance that, but I'm not sure that that we have the same vision in mind that is behind your question, anonymous attendee. Any other questions?
I see 3 in the chat itself. So there's some in the Q&A, which you just saw, and then there's also some in the chat.
What is required to operate your software? Is there a secure FTP link to IW? No. The platform is web-based, so the advantages of integration. You don't have to use our platform for everything. We have people who write items in our platform and then export them, or I guess conceivably you could write them elsewhere and import them. But the integration that I referred to is is enabled by having everything together in the platform. So the ideal model would be for subject matter experts to come in and in whatever step, whether it's JTA to start the JTA, or maybe you already have a blueprint, or you're going to create a blueprint from a curriculum and you would import the blueprint, and then they would come in and write items, and that as much as possible, all of it would happen within the system. And we do not support, like downloading the items through secure FTP or something like that. I suppose that we could look into that, but the export would be through, HTTPS. Carol Curley asks, what format of the item export from the system has been integrated with other major test development platforms? And the answer is that we're going to export in QTI. We're not currently exporting QTI, and I don't know that anybody has tested the integration. I guess if you literally mean the term integration, the answer is that we have not integrated with any other testing platforms except for PSI. I didn't say this, but when we create an exam within the platform, this is more the topic of the next webinar, it can be published immediately. I used to publish exams, like literally 15, 20 years ago, and I remember it as being extraordinarily tedious. And then I handed off the exam documents to a vendor, and they spent a long time getting the documents ready. That bears no resemblance to what we do. We more or less, press a button and the exam is provisioned. So that process is quite a bit different. But other than that integration, we don't have any other integrations. How much does the software cost? I have no idea. That's not a psychometric question.
That varies depending on a lot of factors too. So I think we'll have to follow up with that one offline.
Can you import existing items from another bank? If so, what variables are required? So you can import items. That capability is being enhanced right now, and so we'd have to look at the specific case to look at what parameters are required. But it doesn't necessarily require anything other than the items. Like you don't have to upload psychometric analysis results or anything like that. Can Serverless platform be used only for item writing and banking? Yes. Yep. It is being used today for that purpose. Any other questions?
Wow, and it's 12:29. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah, so the Serverless is a modular platform, so it can be used in different stages of the process, like Alan said. We're happy to take any additional questions that any of you guys might have. Oh, I see a couple.
Kara asks if we're going to support something other than multiple choice. The answer is yes. In fact, the system, I've written non-multiple choice items in the system, but but we need to surface those capabilities. So right now, you couldn't do it, but we will soon be importing non-multiple choice items, and you'll be able to author them. Will this presentation be loaded on the website, Mary Beth? The
Yes,
answer
it
is
will.
yes.
Yep.
Yes, it will.
Okay, so that takes us up to our time today. And
Thank you all.
yes, thank you for attending, and feel free to send any questions you might have. We've got an email address up there that we can field them to the right person and make sure that we get them answered. Thank you.
Thank you.